A simple working definition of charisma is the power to command attention in order to achieve a positive outcome. Charisma isn't any magical gift. It's something that you can learn to become charismatic so that I can build my business and be there for those out in the world who need me. And that takes us right into what we're going to talk about next, which are 3 steps to igniting your charisma.
Welcome and thank you all for joining us for another Justia webinar. My name is Nina and I'll be the moderator for today. Now, to kick things off, I wanted to introduce our speakers, Mark Halpert and Scott Mason. Mark W. Halpert is a global LinkedIn laureate. He is a trainer teaching sales and HR departments, professional service firms, and business professionals, as well as a personal coach where his clients learn to recount how their past success reinforces who they are today and where they can take their clients in the future. He also serves as a consultant, adding the power of LinkedIn to marketing events, trips, and other projects. Scott Mason is an attorney and a transformational executive leadership coach for lawyers looking to up-level their careers and leadership skills. Working with Scott, they discover a career path that aligns with their purpose, as well as helping them find their personal voice and building a plan for change so they can build their law practice and fast-track their careers. Now, the webinar presentation that you're about to watch will be approximately 1 hour, but Mark and Scott will be taking audience questions once that presentation is complete. So if you have any questions that come up during the presentation, please feel free to place them at that Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen, and we will go ahead and answer those once the presentation is complete. Now, without further ado, here are Mark and Scott to discuss charisma and in person and on LinkedIn business development for attorneys.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It is good to be here. Let me just do a final little tweak here. And it is good to be here, able to talk to you this afternoon about charisma in person and on LinkedIn business development for attorneys. I'm going to talk about charisma in person. And then, as Nina mentioned a few minutes ago, Mark is going to get into how you can translate those skills into LinkedIn and make your business and your law practice into something epic. So before we move any further, let me talk to you a little bit about why charisma matters so much. Both Mark and I are going to keep it real with you today, starting off with this very first set of statements. The speed of business in the legal profession is quick and ever-changing. And this requires, now more than at any point in history, for clients who are faced with massive choices and a whirlwind of a business environment to be able to make fast decisions about who they work with, often based on emotions, first reactions, or the general impression that they may have had of you or other people when they met you a little while back. The hyper-competitiveness of the legal profession, therefore, requires that every attorney who is in the business of building their business in any way whatsoever maximize their impact simply in order to stand out and be remembered. Success in the legal profession often hinges, quite frankly, particularly from a business development perspective, on networking and relationship building, which requires each of us as attorneys to be able to create and put out into the world a version of ourselves that's positive and that people can actually remember, despite some legal issues that we work on that can be distasteful or unpleasant for potential clients. Attorneys also have to be able to be easily understood when we speak. We can't just be talking the way we might have in law school, throwing out all sorts of fancy Latin terms or using words like words they don't understand, like precedent even as an example. We have to have a compelling message that any potential prospect can understand and that can convey both our knowledge and skill, but also that we have the warmth and the ability to be on their side and have their back. I'm going to share briefly an example of someone who lacked this and the devastating impact it had on their business. So for many years, I was part of a business networking group that met at 7 o'clock in the morning. People were already tired and a little bit grumpy simply because we were meeting at 7 a.m. And there was an attorney in the group. And every week when we went around and gave a 30 to 45-second pitch about who we were and what we did, he said the same thing over and over in a monotone, without any ability to engage the audience, or without any enthusiasm, without any charisma. And it was devastating to see how people would respond. He'd stand up and suddenly that half-eaten piece of bacon from your breakfast a half an hour ago became extremely compelling. Or the clouds in the window outside became these fantastical places that drew everyone's eyes right into them. Phones whipped out. Interestingly enough, I left that networking group, but a few years later, he called me up and asked if I could provide a testimonial or some sort of reference for him. And the tragedy was, I remembered him, and I remembered that he was a lawyer, but I had no idea what he did. I had no idea as to any client stories that might have indicated that he had that depth of knowledge. And I had no idea how I could convey that he would care about those who he worked with. It was a tragic demonstration of the devastating impact of not having charisma. I also, before we move on from this slide, do want to point out that there is a moral and an ethical case for making sure that every single person on this webinar both has charisma and is displaying it. And that moral and ethical case is predicated on one assumption that I hope is true for every single person here, and that is the belief that what we do as attorneys matters, that people can benefit from what we do, that organizations can survive and have an impact on this planet because of what we do. If we believe that what we or our firms do matter, then we have an ethical obligation to make sure that others know about it and are compelled to utilize our services. If not, they're missing out on something that they need. And so I stand and will die on the hill that being charismatic isn't just nice to build your business, but that each of us have an ethical obligation to be charismatic. And that's why I feel so passionately about this subject. So, who is today's presentation specifically targeting? First of all, any attorney who is seeking to leverage charisma in order to build their business, whether it's through public speaking, audio or video platforms like podcasts or YouTube, or any activities involving presentation skills. And that includes presentations before your C-suite, if you're in-house counsel, or before clients, or at networking groups. Introverts seeking to build professional and business visibility. We're going to have a specific conversation about introversion and charisma a little bit later in this. And then any lawyers who want to use and effectively build their own charismatic skills to network so they can develop their businesses. I won't go into my bio because Nina said more about me than I would ever have said about myself. And she said it beautifully. So thank you for that, Nina. You all know who I am. Let's briefly talk about what we're going to cover today during my portion. First of all, what charisma is and is not. Number two, what keeps attorneys from being charismatic. Number three, an easy 3-point process that you can use to become more charismatic in case you're not. Number four, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, how introverts can become charismatic. And then we're going to review some key takeaways. So let's get right into the meat of this talk. I know y'all have been waiting for it. What is charisma and what is not? Well, this dude, the lawyer stomping down the hall of his firm, that ain't charismatic. But you didn't need me to tell you that, There are some stereotypes about what charisma is and isn't. So let's talk about first what charisma is. There is no clear official definition of what charisma is. It's one of those things where you hear a lot of, oh, I know it when I see it. But the word does have clear historical roots that are relevant to every aspect of our inquiry and our discussion about this today. The word is actually rooted in Greek mythology for any of you who love old myths. There was a goddess named Charis, who was one of the three graces. They were the goddesses that basically attended Aphrodite, the goddess of love. And Charis was the embodiment of beauty. Beauty of expression, in a way, is exactly what charisma was. Now, St. Paul, when he wrote his letters that have been incorporated into the New Testament around AD 50, listed 9 gifts of the Spirit, which I put on the slides here: knowledge, faith, healing, miracles, prophecy, discernment, tongues, and interpretation. And these holy gifts really began to crystallize what we have come to understand as charisma. And the quote I have here from the book, The Theory of Social and Economic Organization, summarizes a lot of what some old school thinking about charisma was, that it was a certain magical quality that one might have obtained from God or the gods that gave you the ability to be persuasive and to be a leader. And as lawyers, being leaders and leadership itself are fundamental to who and what we are. But I will disagree with the philosophers. Charisma isn't any magical gift. It's something that you can learn. And I say that as someone who spent decades of my life with no charisma at all, who would open his mouth and be dull as dirt, boring, dry, bureaucratic, and angry at best. But I turned things around. We're going to talk about how today. But before we get to that, for the purposes of this conversation, a simple working definition of charisma is the power to command attention in order to achieve a positive outcome. The power to command attention in order to achieve a positive outcome. Charisma, for the purposes of this conversation, and we're going to go to the bottom of the slide here first, is not the ability to command attention in order to hurt others or destroy lives. That goes as to the first thing that charisma is not. It's not necessarily tethered to ethics, but for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to focus on positive outcomes. Dark charisma is the subject of a whole other conversation, and there's an excellent book on Hitler's charisma that explains this in depth and is frightening and tragic and horrific all at the same time. What else is charisma not? Number one, it's not the mere act of being entertaining. It's not the ability to stand up in front of a room and speak with massive degrees of demonstrated knowledge or technical expertise. As a matter of fact, that can be quite boring. It's not merely being dramatic or having a high energy level. It's also not necessarily having a huge personality. Vocal volume is not necessarily charisma. We're going to talk about that a lot more later. Universal in its execution or how it's perceived. Charisma is something that's highly individuated and tailored towards an audience. Charisma isn't the same as charm, although charm can and should be part of charisma. They're not identical. And then let's never forget, charisma is not necessarily that you have wisdom, intellect, or even the ability to lead. It is the means to compel people to get behind what you want them to do so you can achieve that positive outcome. It's a tool of galvanization. So what keeps lawyers in particular from being charismatic? I believe there are a series of myths that we tell ourselves inside, internalizations of larger cultural narratives. That's why I call them myths that we as lawyers tend to take on as part of our personas and our belief systems, but they hold us back and keep us from being fully what we can be as radiant presences on this planet. The first of these 3 toxic myths is the social myth. And the social myth is lived out when you are experiencing your life through a series of obligations to fulfill the social expectations of other people. whether perceived or actual. So in the case of attorneys, there are large social stereotypes that exist out there about how attorneys behave. If you say to yourself, I need to be a bulldog and stomp down the hallway like that cartoon guy Mr. Mason showed me earlier, well, then you're buying into a stereotype and living out a social myth. This type of mindset contrasts with trust, authenticity, and the actual belief or beliefs that your clients, the jurors, or opposing counsel might actually have. So, for instance, I used to sit on a board that would make some decisions about people that would apply for a particular service. And sometimes they would come in with lawyers who were attempting to be charismatic, and they were screaming and yelling at this board. And they were buying, in my opinion, into the social myth of lawyers as the bulldog. The problem is, we as board members didn't want to hear that. That wasn't what we actually wanted. He was hurting himself and actually being the opposite of charismatic. Next, after the social myth, there is the ritual myth. And that is when you engage in a set of behaviors because it worked at one point in your career, but you sort of cement that explanation into your mind as to why you behave that way into a permanent justification for continuing to behave in that way, even when circumstances no longer require it. So, for instance, I had to behave a certain way in my career when I started doing litigation in the Bronx. It was a very aggressive style. But when I moved into other areas of my career, particularly executive management or chief legal officer sorts of positions, the CEOs that I worked for didn't want a Bronx litigator talking to them. So what I was doing by failing to adapt my behaviors to the circumstances because those behaviors had worked once before was live out the ritual myth. This contrasts with the growth mindset that we really need to constantly embrace if we're going to build our businesses and be out there as brands that bring clients and attract them to us, and everywhere else that we might encounter people. And a great place to read about how to embrace a growth mindset is set forth at the bottom of the slide here. The book Mindset by Carol Dweck is a masterpiece and a classic. If you haven't read it, you should. The final of the three toxic myths is the doomsday or the apocalyptic myth. This is when you're afraid to change your behaviors or to learn and exhibit a new type of behavior because you're afraid that you'll fail. In other words, if I change how I present, if I take that risk and become charismatic in the world, people won't like me anymore and I'll lose my clients. My business will collapse. I'll get fired, all these other things. Again, if you are behaving in a certain way or manifesting your presence in the world in a certain way based on fear, which is what the doomsday myth is all about, then what's happening is you're conveying to others who are observing you on a subconscious level a lack of confidence. They won't trust you. They won't forget. They won't remember you. And it hurts you. It keeps you from being able to attract those positive outcomes that are at the core of charisma. So from a mindset perspective, how can you begin to obliterate these toxic myths? First of all, you need to keep it real about the impact of a lack of charisma on your practice and its bottom line. Acknowledgement is the first step. My lack of charisma is hurting my career and it's going to hurt my ability to grow. That can be a hard one. It was a hard one for me to accept because it requires a deep level of honesty and self-criticism, but it's important. Number two, it's important for us as a matter of logical thinking to weigh the risk of our firm's invisibility or us actually off-putting potential clients with the long-term impact and the long-term impact of this on our financial viability with the benefits or against the benefits of actually taking the time and effort to learn how to be charismatic. Now, since the billable hour is what most of us base our work on, remember that our time has value and we squander that at our own risk. Anytime we are like that attorney at the networking meeting that I mentioned earlier, and we're up there presenting in a way that bores people or enables them to forget us, we are throwing money down the drain. So assess the cost of your lack of charisma to you honestly and to your clients as well, who are not who are potential clients, at least, who are not accessing what you have to offer, and then make that connection between those costs and your bottom line. Then it's time to rewrite the narrative to say that I'm going to commit to the investment necessary to become charismatic so that I can build my business and be there for those out in the world who need me. And that takes us right into what we're going to talk about next, which are 3 steps to igniting your charisma. First, again, the theme of self-honesty and acknowledgement is core to stepping into your charisma, and it comes up again here. It's really invaluable to take the time to self-assess yourself through the lens of what your full charismatic range is, and we'll explain what that means in a minute. The first thing you want to do is a charismatic diagnostic. You want to begin to ask people to assess you, but you also probably want to begin to record yourself. It might just be getting your iPhone and talking for a few minutes in front of it, or doing a little video setup and practicing some of your speeches or your pitches, and then reviewing it over and over again. The purpose of this is to get practice at being charismatic, just like when you're on trial or with regard to any other practice area. But then number 2, you want to be able to note the qualities that you have that are positive. The purpose of this isn't for you to just wag your finger at yourself, but to say, these are the things that make me unique, and I want to bring them out. Your uniqueness, the things that go as to the core, as to what individuates you, are going to be the differentiators that enable other people to remember you. And they're your secret superpowers. Then you want to use your legal skill of issue spotting to focus on these self-expression gems and be able to then apply that to assessments that you might do of other speakers. I urge people to spend some time on YouTube and just watch great leaders or great lawyers talk and say, wow, that's someone who's not exactly like me, but based on my own assessment, I could incorporate some of what they do and become more charismatic myself. Then, and this one can be hard for us lawyers, it's important to connect your brain to your heart. Brain is about messaging, not just talking, as so many of us lawyers love to do, and going off on irrelevancies and citing statutes and case law and all that sort of stuff, but thinking first and foremost, always not about what you want to say, but what the person that you're speaking to wants to hear. So who is that person? Is it a judge? Is it opposing counsel? Is it someone at a networking meeting? And then, do you know why they care about what you're saying? Make sure that you understand that, because the level of persuasiveness that you want to employ is related to the extent to which they have an interest in what you're saying. And then, what then do you want them to take? Anytime you communicate from a business development perspective or from a professional development perspective, what is the action that you want to leave the listener engaged with taking? And you want to engage them to take it through inspiration, not through scolding, not through righteous indignation, not through any of these other things that can become core parts of our public speaking toolbox as attorneys in contexts that are not necessarily appropriate for business development as well as career advancement. Then make sure, and this is where a lot of lawyers, including me, by the way, have a hard time going, and that is matching your message to emotions and expressing them. You, having assessed yourself previously, will understand what your charismatic gems are. Be prepared to bring them in as is relevant to what you're saying. And when you write out your speeches, if this is hard for you, write out literally what emotions you want to express. I do that with every single speech I ever give. The reason I do that is because sometimes it can be easy to get caught up in the moment. But if you're saying to yourself, these are the emotions I intend to convey, it's more easy to actually remember to bring them out. There are some risks that you need to take in order to be charismatic. And I say this because lawyers are, due to the nature of the work that we do, sometimes very averse to taking risks. But when it comes to charisma and leadership, more generally, I would even argue, the ability to take managed and considered risks is almost always only a positive. First of all, make sure that you embrace humor and vulnerability. I've tried to make a few jokes up here. I hope that you all have giggled at least once, but if not, I would hope that you all can see that there's a sense of humor that I'm bringing here, even if I'm afraid that it might fall flat, as well as talking about some of my own struggles. That's bringing vulnerability into the room. Connection is tied to these things. There is a famous Toastmaster. Toastmaster is a great public speaking organization who once said, to have a successful communication or a public oratory experience, you need to make them laugh, you need to make them cry, you need to make them gasp, you need to make them sigh. If you're talking about something that's boring, let's say you're giving a speech on HIPAA, use storytelling or hypotheticals that, again, have emotional resonance that you bring into the conversation in order to make sure that those who are listening understand the importance and the power and the emotion behind what you're saying. Improv and stand-up comedy classes are charisma gold if you ever have the chance to take them. And then make sure, by the way, when you're making a joke or being vulnerable, be vulnerable about yourself and make fun of yourself. Don't be putting other people down. And then become fearless. Become fearless. Say to yourself, I'm going to practice in front of friends of mine who will give me feedback that might be harsh or might be painful, but will make me better. That courage, once you utilize it to become more charismatic, will pay off in spades more and more over time as you're out there being a charismatic presence. If you're an introvert, these are my tips. First of all, it's important to remember and self-reinforce always what charisma is not. And you can refer to these slides in the future because they're going to be distributed. I once had a 72-year-old woman come up to me and say, Scott, you're 6'1", you're a big strapping man with a loud voice and this personality. I can't be charismatic because I can't be like you. No, you can't be like me and I can't be like her. Remember that charisma is not just being big and loud. It's about being able to convey a message with passion. So make sure that if you are an introvert and speaking, you're focusing relentlessly and over again on message, message, message. Also, remember that quietness and dramatic pauses can be incredibly powerful. People will pay attention to you if you utilize them. And that's an introvert's superpower. If you're nervous up there, hand gestures like this for okay, or I'm confident in this, or this. These sorts of things, or having your palms out, not facing yourself, having your palms out, are default gestures that you can sort of fall into that may give you a level of physical comfort when you're speaking. And then make sure, if you're an introvert, to always, before a presentation and afterwards, schedule downtime so that you are able to pull up the energy you need to have before you give a presentation, but more importantly, recover from the stress of it and recharge your energy. Too many people, if they're introverts, go just from one meeting to the next without understanding that as an introvert, that need for alone time to recharge is especially important if you are consciously working to convey your charisma. So what are some key takeaways before we get to Mark Halpert? First of all, charisma is the power to command attention in order to achieve a positive outcome. It is not the same as merely being loud and entertaining. A lack of charisma can negatively impact your practices, bottom line, and your career itself. Attorneys tend to lack charisma due to the 3 toxic myths I discussed earlier associated with personal or professional self-expectations. Changing this underlying narrative within is the key to bringing out your own charisma. Now, as a practical matter, connecting a sharp message, your brain, with authentic and appropriate emotion, and then practicing allows that powerhouse vocal valve to open up and your charisma will gush right out. And if you're an introvert, remembering that you can be charismatic by focusing tightly on message, personality-driven, very specific default techniques such as the body language tools I discussed earlier, and allotting downtime before and after any presentation that you have to give. So you'll get this information through Justia when this course is over. And if you have any questions further about this and you want to ask them and you're not able to have them in the immediate aftermath of this presentation, don't hesitate to reach out. I love to meet people and talk to them and help them become charismatic because, as I said earlier, I want everyone on this call to have a future that is epic. Yeah. I'm going to stop the share screen and turn the meeting over to Mark Halbert.
Another epic presentation by Scott Mason, and I've seen him present many, many, many times, and they're amazing. They really are. I hope you got lots of good things out of this. I'm going to follow up on this right now and bring this good energy up. We are all required to be a lot bigger and better on our screen than we think others believe we are. And this is just one of the facts of social media today and how people buy social media. But there's a problem, and that is most people feel like this guy in the screen. What do we do? Where do we start? What do we do? Why don't I know what to do to start here? And it's the reasons are we weren't taught to talk about ourselves. That goes back to elementary school. We really don't want to spend the time, nor do we really think that we have the patience to learn a new program. Who knows and how long that'll take. It wasn't taught to you in law school. It's still, unfortunately, not being taught in law school. There is no LinkedIn course on the job. Very few law firms or organizations bring in LinkedIn trainers to teach LinkedIn on a group training basis, and that's a real shame because that's a great branding opportunity. And there are very few courses that really address LinkedIn for lawyers. So most lawyers find somewhat suddenly they have to market themselves, but they never thought they'd have to. And that could be because you worked in a large firm for a long time, you had a marketing department, and suddenly you decided you're going to go out on your own, be a solo, hang out your shingle, wait for the phones to ring, and they don't ring. So you got to go out and market, and you have to continuously feed that funnel to market yourself. Well, that's an on-the-job, all-the-time requirement, and you never had to do that before. There's a lot of people who do not make themselves attractive on LinkedIn or any other social medium. We never really had to sit down and write or assess. We were talking a lot about self-assessment a few minutes ago, about what makes us special, different. Where is the reason that somebody would engage with you? Because they found inspiration from what they heard or saw you say or do. They never had access to a tool like LinkedIn because it is still the only thing like it around for business professionals, especially professional practitioners. LinkedIn still likes to think of itself as a job board. It still markets itself as a job board, which to me is very odd. And I don't work for LinkedIn, so basically I can say whatever I want. But it's really not a job board entirely. LinkedIn keeps changing. There were 165 changes to LinkedIn in 2023 alone. And it gets harder and harder to use. Things go in funny places. Things get hidden. And then entire functions disappear. And there's a huge amount of angst and anxiety around the ever-changing algorithm of LinkedIn, and people try to feed that beast, and it's an unnecessary effort, in my opinion. And then a lot of people just can't attribute the ROI to LinkedIn, so they just decide to ignore it. Well, I'm here to tell you that all that's wrong, and that you shouldn't feel like this guy, and I want you to think of what LinkedIn really is. It's about branding yourself when everybody else around you looks exactly the same. How does somebody remember you from the pack? And I made a word up a couple of years ago, amazinger, and it works every time. And LinkedIn is about being amazinger than the competition. So if somebody says, I need an attorney who, your name and face come to mind. That's the very best thing that can happen. Or at least there's a function like LinkedIn that lets them find people like you. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So you want that red line drawn around you from all the rest of the other attorneys in your firm, in another firm down the hall, in the building, on the block, on the street, in the town, in the city, in the state that you live in the country you live in, because now we have global access, 24/7, 366 this year. LinkedIn is successful when you remain true to yourself and say the things that you need to say, but stay in the lane that keeps you saying the best about yourself. And again, it's not being boisterous or larger than life. It's being true and honest with yourself. And I'll bring this slide back again later because I truly believe that you never really learn something the first time you see or hear it. You have to be reinforced with it at the end for the main theme. So that's why it'll come back. So get ready for that. LinkedIn is a door, it's a portal. It opens two ways. LinkedIn allows the reader to see you by looking into you and what is the brand of why you. It opens that door. LinkedIn also allows you to push out your brand, push out your charisma, so they'll want to engage with you and they can find you. So it's really fine points here, but nonetheless, the door is always open on LinkedIn. It runs all the time. I'm amazed at how in the middle of the night, there's so much banter on LinkedIn and good quality conversation occurs all the time in every language, every day. And finally, that two-way portal is eventually going to be your career story. What you tell others about where you came from makes you who you are today. What they give back to you today and helps you face your future. So there are a lot of problems that you can solve for other people. And there are a lot of things that other people can provide you additional experience you've never had and makes you better at what you do. And you stay in that lane and you expand that lane as you feel comfortable. But charisma is not being outward bound. It's listening to others. You need to poke your head out from under the herd and clue into what's being discussed. What are people interested in? Because you can talk all day long. If they're not interested in what you're talking about, no one's going to retain your name or how to find you. You can listen to what other people say and evaluate it. And you can agree with them and add value every time. Just saying I agree or a thumbs up or clapping hands doesn't tell the originator anything. Tell them why you appreciated it, where the value came to you. And you can disagree professionally as well. Create conversation around a topic. Because the way we learn is by the way we argue and we find new ways to do things. You can put new ideas forth on LinkedIn. And in doing all this and doing this consistently and reliably and relevantly, you become referable as the go-to expert. You want to be the go-to. You want people to remember you and think about you every time they need you because you've delivered high quality, you've delivered reliability, you're consultative and responsive and in the moment. So stay on top of the advances in your field, whatever field that may be, whatever subfield that may be, and listen to what others are saying. And if you hear that they're coming up a little short in what they need to know, jump in if that's your area of expertise, or bring somebody in with you to do that. And often these can be very, very additive aspects of your career. LinkedIn is the place to speak up. And I love this slide because it perks you up. It wakes you up within professional ethical boundaries. And I stress the ethics in the legal profession. And I am not going to touch ethics beyond saying that you know what your ethics are. And on LinkedIn, everything you put on LinkedIn came from you, with the exception of endorsements for your skills and recommendations. And those both are approved by you or should be taken down by you if they are untrue. If somebody endorses you for a skill they've never seen you had, by ethics, you should take their endorsement down. And recommendations come to you, and you should not post recommendations for you if they contravene the ethics in the field. And you are responsible for this, nobody else. Tell us or we'll never know. So many people say, well, I never told you this, or something comes up in conversation. Where is that on LinkedIn? Where is that in your profile? That's a salient point. That's a decision-making point for people. You need to tell us things that we need to know. If you hold them inside, you are hurting yourself. You are shortchanging yourself. And in telling us, make us want to know more. Because people read your LinkedIn profile from the top down. To the extent you can get them to read as far down as possible, you will engage them. They will contact you. You work your magic from there to win that piece of business. I can only help you get to their attention. Make each verbal contact you have with them reinforce what they've read with you on LinkedIn, so no buzzers go off in their head of a mismatch. Oh, that's not the person I'm hearing in my earphone who I read about on LinkedIn. He described himself, she described herself on LinkedIn differently than what I'm hearing. They stop listening. They're not interested anymore because they contacted you because of what they read. So make whatever you put on LinkedIn about your personal story, your career narrative, really reflect in your language, in the way you express yourself, what it is that you want people to hear, understand, and be inspired by. So when they contact you, they continue along that road and reverberate in the perception of you as a thought leader. People will remember you. They will bring business to you. They will refer you to people who need to find you on the short list of people to consider. And this will happen frequently, only if you are yourself. So if you're a solo or a small firm, you may not have all the expertise in-house, but you thrive and you succeed by the colleagues who gather around you, and you're as good as the people that are in your chain. Said another way, your network is your net worth. If your network is no good, or if there's a weak link in the network, then the chain is broken. So remember that the gears grind together. We all refer upon each other. We rely upon each other. I can feel very comfortable saying to anybody, you need to contact Scott Mason. He can help you with that. I don't even have to get Scott's permission because I know him so well. I am a constant referrer of Scott Mason and of many other people, and they know they can help my referee. And I know I don't have to worry about them following up on the referral, and they'll do a grand job of it. And that's when you are reliable, and that's when you are referable. And until you earn that, you have to work at that, and you have to keep working at it even after you've earned the reliability. Because if you stumble, you've lost all that forward momentum. So you have to do great things. You have to say great information, share great content. Make it a culture around you. Make it the culture of your firm. Make it the culture of your department, your practice area. You post material. You add your opinion on other people's posts. You comment and create conversation around something. And I always get the question, how often should I post? And the simple answer is you comment as frequently as you have something valuable and energetic and engaging to say. And if you do that and you continue to create that culture around you, you will find that you will end up commenting 3 or 4 times a week. And that's a good thing. But 3 or 4 times is not the bogey. It's every time you have something that's valuable for the market. That helps you stay visible, because anytime you leave LinkedIn or you do not comment on LinkedIn, you are forgotten. So you need to be relevant. And that goes for vacations and leaves of absence. You can program LinkedIn to layer in your commentary on certain time frames and certain days. It's all there. It's all a function there. So I want you, as I said, to be amazinger. I want you to be fascinating-er, because you have to continue to build on that fascination, on that amazingness. You never want to just like something with an emoji or clapping hands to celebrate. You are educated, elevated people. You should be commenting with rich, engaging words. Why? You look smarter that way. Why? The person who you are commenting to feels and understands what you liked about what they said, and that helps them say more things to the audience, and it helps you become part of their closest audience. So reconnect with former colleagues, Connect with people and say to them, if you have some connectivity there, hey, you and I talk really well together on this conversation. Why don't we continue this? And every time I post something, you give me a comment. Every time you post something, I'll give you a comment. We both promise each other we'll only comment on each other when it's valuable and it creates additional conversation. Keep people up to date. Let us know what you're doing. Let us know you're putting the last minute polish on a presentation, or you're finished with a case that had great consequences, or what you've learned from working on a case. Tell us where you are. Vulnerability is great, but being able to say, I am smart enough, big enough to accept my vulnerability, and I'm continuously working, creates that, and learning creates that culture of content around you. So Emil Zola, I love this quote. We're like books. Most people only see us on the outside. Very few read only the introduction, and most people just believe what other people say about us. Now, our content comes from us, so we have to give our content. And those few who will actually know our content, I'm absolutely convinced, will want to read the whole book and will want to read that book again and again. So Emil Zola was really on target with that. I'm going to show you some things to know about creating a currency around you of positive judgment, a currency like you spend money, like you give something back in return for the spending of money. So craft your profile to make people want to know more. I said that before, I'll say it again. So you absorb it, you understand it in a new context. Don't leave gaps. Always wonder, what are the gaps in employment? Why did I leave one firm and go to another firm? Why did I take a time off and have to go off the working grid and go back to work? Because if you don't tell us, we're going to fabricate reasons, and that's not a good thing. Why are there differences in my experience, in my area of expertise? Explain that. And why have my ideas changed? And explain that. Because the distraction eclipses the positive momentum. So get in front of that problem. When you project your charisma outwardly, you are not self-serving. You are giving. It's that door. It's that portal. It's giving out through the portal so that they can come into the portal and accept and learn from what you have. So project so people will want to gather around you. Your message should be a message that hushes all the noise around everybody but you and the person that you are talking to. Like you're in a big room and everybody's talking, and you only want the laser beam focus of the person you're talking to only hear and listen to what you're saying despite the noise. And use this context of what you're talking about and great content on top of that to offer views and share material that they may not ever have heard of, so they can recognize you're bringing it to them in a new and unusual way. And further on this idea, comment and pivot when necessary and customize to the audience and offer a unique perspective that the audience will appreciate and deliver that news and that information. It's never the boilerplate oration that you pulled off the shelf that you just presume works for everybody. And if you remember Star Trek, Mr. Spock had the Vulcan mind melt. Meld with the minds of the people you're talking to. Create that fusion between the two of you. Instant rapport. And don't leave it there. Build on it with time, additively. So conversations lead to comments on LinkedIn. Comments build your charisma. Charisma is felt in the afterglow of having worked with you, and people want to refer you and repeat that again. That whole cycle works so effectively on LinkedIn. So network up, connect with the highest quality people for the highest quality signals that you can give them and they can give you. Learn from them, admit you don't know everything, and all parties benefit. And there will be times when somebody you've networked up with who knew something you didn't know needs you because you know something they don't know, and everybody benefits. And generously be a referral source of best-in-class colleagues and it will be repaid forward. If you haven't seen that movie, or if you saw it a long time ago, see it again, because pay it forward is what social media, and primarily LinkedIn on business, is all about. So practical tip in all this stuff is make them glued to your commentary. Catch their attention. Use creative language in all ways you can. You've so much space on LinkedIn to make your point and make it again in a different context and impress somebody. And make it easy to contact you in your contact information. Be sure there's every which way to communicate with you that is possible, including your mobile phone number, because there are some out there who only want to text and get your attention immediately. If you give your business phone number, no one can text your business number, and that's a dead end. Invoke people's names, invoke company names in your posts. You have enticed them by using their name and appealing to their ego, and they will feel likely obligated to comment, and you thank them for invoking your name in thanking them for their shout out. Best to reply to comments within 24 hours, within a couple of hours, in words, and to make the conversation go further. And that allows you to put it back to the other person to give you a little time to collect and recast your comment back to that person. So it's all about using time effectively, using your voice effectively, using your persona effectively, using your experience effectively. And encourage intelligent discussion among all peers, because I am absolutely amazed at the number of LinkedIn coaches I learn from and who learn from me. They are my cooperators. I cooperate with them as much as I compete with them, and often I learn more than I compete with them for. So I am constantly learning, as are all of us. So great content allows you to share. Great content allows you to keep us up to date. Great content allows you to create original material. And great content allows you to show the value you offer, so we feel confident in referring you. Be a thinker, like the picture. So there are 4 ways that I really want you to understand when you begin to write posts, to write the best posts you possibly can. And your post in your mind, before you write it, you know what you want to say, but you're not quite sure where it falls. These 4 sections may give you some ideas. First of all, what do you want your connections or followers to know on LinkedIn that they don't know yet? And that can be fact-based material, information, features, new cases, newsworthy events, new developments in research, that type of thing. You're imparting data and information and wisdom from your experience. Once you've imparted data, you can follow up, or you may even just skip the imparting of data. What do you want them to feel emotionally or cerebrally? And Scott talked about this as well, to appreciate your contribution to them. They may not know this or feel this yet, but you feel it. And therefore, if you feel it and you're a recognized authority, you are making your work a part of their work. So feel confident, folks, in relying upon me. This is what you're saying. I am giving you something to feel and spread. End with a call to action. Do you feel this way? What would it take to make you understand and work this way? Has this helped you? How can I help you further? Call to action is what we want. You may jump right to a belief factor, or the knowledge and the feeling may lead to a belief factor in a series of posts. This is what I want you to believe that you don't believe yet. And let me tell you why it's a fresh viewpoint. And it's crazy. It seems ridiculous. It seems different. No one's ever thought this way or expressed it. Or I've experimented, or I have experience and I've come to these conclusions. Or I've done research in business or in the law. And these are things that you need to know and you need to believe, because you haven't been quite left to understand them yet. And you can repurpose all the old ways of thinking, all the isms from before the pandemic, to what we are in the new now, which is constantly changing. So the belief factor is a constant motion. And finally, what do you want them to do? At the end of the day, no matter what they know, if they do nothing with it, no matter what they feel or believe that they do nothing with it, it's for naught. You want them to share your content. Please share my content with 5 of your best colleagues who can benefit from it. It's a great way to call to action. Please comment on my post if you think that I've given you some new information, how it might help you in your business or in your practice. Please, if you don't agree, let's be professional. Tell me why you think I'm incorrect, and maybe we both can learn from each other. Please engage with me for more conversation like Scott did at the end of his presentation, call to action. Please refer to others. Please refer me to others who may need to know these things I know, these things I feel, these things I believe that you now know, feel, and believe. And how can we help each other? At the end of the day, this is about helping people. This is what we're here for. So wrapping this up quickly here, there are 3 R's and 4 C's that I've created in my posts. I've talked about relevance, reliability, and referability a lot already. This is to be top of mind in everything you do, not only on your profile, but on your posts. And then there's 4 C's. Be concise, be clear. Don't just write for lawyers, because there are a lot of lawyers who are reading your profile who will turn off to a lawyerly LinkedIn profile. Be yourself, be a human, and tell us where you can help us. Be cogent. Use words richly. I don't have to tell lawyers that. They do that very well already. Be consistent. At least try to do 2 times a week on posting, especially when you have something compelling. And it may be a couple of times a day on those days when you have something compelling in a breaking news situation. And make it all wrap up to who you are as the go-to person, the memorable person for all this. So conversational. As you write your post, write your profile, let Microsoft's read aloud function in Microsoft Word and in Outlook, read it aloud in an artificial voice and listen to what the voice is saying to you. And you will find that you have many things to change that your eye missed as you speed read through it, that your ear doesn't hear as fast. And that is a good time to recalculate. Craft your story. Stay away from acronyms. Give me white space between your paragraphs, not big, thick chunks of documentation. People, non-lawyers, will not read this. They will leave. They will not come back. And it's okay to use contractions in more casual language. We're in a more casual universe right now, but always try to aim for wider conversation. So comments on thoughtful words, please, no emojis. Use great words. Tell us why. Be amazinger. All those sort of things. Now, ping on their radar screen because they're constantly receiving tremendous amounts of information. Make yourself the one-stop shopping for whatever somebody needs to get the information that you provide. And nourish your colleagues around you. Your colleagues need to be your voice and your helping ears as well. They're there to help you. Be sure that you can refer people. And as the wrap up here, why you? Why you of all the people in your firm, in the street, on the street, anywhere that they are? Why do I want to talk to you? Why is it that you do what you do? Make yourself amazinger. Show your LinkedIn URL on all of your pages, personal pages on the firm's bio to cross-reference from the website to LinkedIn, and show the logo of your firm in your experience section of your LinkedIn profile. 2 really simple, easy things to do, but I love to throw them in the wrap up. So stay in lane, folks. Be as successful and as attractive as you can be, remaining true to yourself, and stay in the lane. I wrote a book on this topic for the American Bar Association. It's now in 2nd edition. It's available on Kindle or on the American Bar Association. It is about how to market yourself as a lawyer or any other legal professional. And it also extends to other professional practices out there as well, like accountancy and architecture as well. So this is where you can find me. You will get a PDF of the slides and all this information, and you can contact me, contact Scott as you see fit. I'll stop sharing my slides so we can grab some questions in what little time we have left.
Awesome. Thank you both for that lovely presentation. And we can now move on to audience questions, as Mark said. So if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them through that Q&A button at the control panel at the bottom of your screen. It looks like we already have one, so we can get started with that. The first one is, can you give me an example of how I can easily showcase my charisma in an initial consultation with a client?
I think that one is directed at me, and so I'll take the lead on answering that. Yes, I can. First of all, above and beyond all else, make sure that you are, as you're listening to what they say, conveying facial expressions and body language that shows that you're listening. That includes not just listening, but reacting, making sure that those reactions are expressed really, leaning forward, backwards, eyebrows, all of those sorts of things. And then if you are able to not interrupt, but to be able to verbalize some expressions, things like, oh my. Ask questions indicating that you were listening, not just to whatever they said, but going back to things that they might have said earlier. Or if you can tie a couple of things together. 5 minutes ago, you said XYZ. I see a common thread between that and the remark that you just made. Can you maybe explain how those two things played out? Not just basic questions like what happened next to get them to just talk more, but that show that you're engaged with them, show that you are having an emotional and an intellectual response. And then as you process and push forward those questions or your responses, try and make sure that they are containing a message that ultimately drives the conversation to what you want that call to action to be. Now, that sounds like it's a lot, but it's actually very doable for lawyers in particular, because we are used to processing complex, detailed information and then being able to put it into various different buckets for expression. But it does take practice on an interpersonal level, but it's within the skill set of every single person on this call.
And just to add to that, if you do this in the LinkedIn messaging service, you get all those threads together and they're all available to you, so you can refer back up to a comment that somebody else made before and revisit it later to be sure that you were clear and that you answered the question. And you ask, we did this yesterday. Somebody asked the question, he answered it. I didn't think that answer was exactly right. So I poked in and I said, can you give us one really great example of that so we all can learn from you? And that became a learning opportunity.
I'll just throw one final thing into the response here. If you have a big personality like I do, thinking about how introverts can be charismatic, going back to that slide earlier, can be of enormous help to you in a one-on-one consultation environment. Sort of using the techniques that introverts have interpersonally is of enormous value, because a huge personality in an initial client consultation can actually undermine trust.
Awesome. Thank you guys for those tips. We have time for a couple more. So the next one is, what specific behaviors should I focus on to create lasting impressions that build authentic connections with other legal professionals?
I'll start with that. And there's one word above and beyond everything else. That word is care. Too many of us in law, and again, I say this as someone who was guilty of it, have achieved levels of success because we have performed and had or done things in our history that impress other people. And so we can become habituated to being impressive and have that as a substitute for the ability to make a real connection. No one feels connected to you because they're impressed with you. No one feels connected with you because of the knowledge that you have. Everyone will feel connected with you if they believe that you genuinely care. That above and beyond anything else is my one word answer to that question.
Nothing to add. Perfectly said.
Awesome. Okay, and then you guys touched on some of these differences just between your two presentations, but our next question is, do you think the approach to using charisma is different or similar from going online to in person? And how would you best bridge that gap?
I'll jump on that one. And that is in my presentation, I made the comment that if somebody reads your profile and gets a feeling that they like what they see, and then they call you or they Zoom with you, and it's different, you've lost the battle. You've lost their interest. So you have to be consistent. You have to be comfortable with who you are and what you have to offer. You have your own way of expressing yourself, and you will use the right expressions in both your written and your oral conversation. And especially if they're asking you for advice, you know what you can and cannot say. Again, ethics come into this, and again, just good professional habits come into this.
In a live context, you will be almost subconsciously, or maybe consciously, if this is something you're choosing to practice because it doesn't come first nature to you, but focusing on the individual reactions of the people in front of you. How is that audience? Are they falling asleep when you're talking? Are they awake? Are they leaning back away from you? Or are they leaning in to hear more? You will want to focus on moving around as is appropriate, as well as standing still when is appropriate. All of these are live techniques that you can't effectively use online. So when it comes to conveying charisma online, above and beyond all else, focus on the camera. Focus on the camera. Focus on the camera. Here are 2 tips that can help you with that. Number 1, imagine that someone that you're attempting to communicate with, the avatar for whoever it is, or maybe someone on the call. I might now be imagining Nina, for instance, is standing right behind that camera. Speak to her or him as if they are there. The audience will read your reaction that way. Number 2, this is a really practical tip that I have learned as a 4-time podcaster. It works. When you're talking in a Zoom room or another virtual call, pull out the window that you are speaking in from anything else that you have open. Then shrink down the size of that window as small as you can and still be able to see it. Then place the entire window directly under your camera, so that even if you feel the need to look down every now and then, it will still appear to those who are listening or watching that you're looking at them. The camera can't detect that sort of difference in your eye placement. If you do that, you will automatically create the illusion that you're speaking to the person who is on the camera. I look at YouTube podcasts all the time, and you see the host like looking down. You can tell they're looking at the person beneath them on the Zoom screen. That camera is everything. And so that's a little tip that you can use to help get away from that habit that will really hurt your charisma online.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for your insight and your wonderful presentation. And thank you all for your questions. We're almost out of time today, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. And I wanted to thank you all for joining us for another Justia webinar. And as I touched on briefly at the beginning of our webinar today, I did want to remind you all of that great place to showcase yourself well online, maybe use some of those tactics that Mark and Scott touched on today with your Justia Lawyer Directory profile. So you get millions of visits there each month. Your profile on the Justia Lawyer Directory helps you connect with clients fast. And if you make sure your profile is as complete as possible and has a great photo, you're all the more likely to connect with those clients. And if you'd like to take it a step further and sign up for Justia Premium Placements, you can feature yourself in the directory listing page above those free organic listings. So to learn more about that, you can always go to marketing.justia.com and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.